I watched a documentary about Andrew Carnegie. Surely you know the name, the steel magnate, the richest man on earth. Really highly controversial. He was kind of a double-faced man. He cared about the image publicly, but did everything to destroy that image privately. He wanted to make a lot of money to do good, and yet on his way of making all that money, he abused and misused and mistreated his employees and did all kind of evil things. You can do your own homework on how evil that man was in his pursuit of riches. It does say that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and you can see that this was the main driver of the man. He caused many different people's deaths, directly or indirectly, partnering with other wicked people and doing all kind of schemes and scams to cut costs and cut corners and other ungodly things. And yet in his latter years, when he got old and retired, he became a philanthropist, gave away all of his money. And he founded about 2,500 libraries, all kinds of museums, all kinds of faculties of education and universities and schools. And one might hear this and say, well, he kind of atoned for himself by doing all of this good and giving to so much charity for education. But I wish to point to you a rather opposite perspective and suggest that, as a matter of fact, in his latter years, he caused more damage to humanity than in his first. Because in his earlier years, as much as he did not care for his workers, and so many, they say about 9% of the steel workers died on the job, which is horrible. Not to talk about the dam that he caused indirectly to collapse and killed about 2,200 people. Not to talk about what happened in Homestead with the strike and the battle and all of those casualties. Not to talk about any of these things. The greatest damage that Andrew Carnegie did to humanity was not in any of these physical acts, but in the spiritual act of further reinforcing, supporting, and expanding the faculties of secular indoctrination. He was no godly man, I can assure you that, but as much as he has done to the people that died physically, how many more have been brainwashed, told lies, learned false history at the Museum of Natural History? How many people have went astray because of the libraries and the faculties of sciences that teach man-made religion, the religion of secularism and humanism? How many people have been turned away from the faith, the true faith, the God of creation, the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, from serving Him, following the Mashiach, Yeshua? How many people have been turned away from eternal life because they put their foot inside a Carnegie Hall to be indoctrinated and misguided and misled to the wrong path? Carnegie was not a good man. And even the good he pretended to do, he did not do. Sure, the people of the world applauded, wow, libraries, we need more educations, universities, Carnegie Hall, Museum of Nat. Yes, that's the wisdom of the world, but the world is an enmity with God. And friendship with the world means enmity with God. Because the world is evil. The world hates God. The world denies God, especially in the last few centuries, ever since, Darwin and his nonsense. He really was the catapult of this mess. He wasn't the first, he didn't come up with it, but the catapult of secularism, humanism, atheism. And Carnegie was another catapult, now with all the resources devoted to the spreading of the false gospel. How many people have been led astray by public education, going to the universities, learning about 14 billion years ago, learning about dinosaurs 60 million years ago, learning all kinds of lies about creation. There was no 65 million years ago. I'm not even getting into that debate because this is not the point of the message. The point of the message is the indoctrination to say that there was. So many people have been led astray because of that one man who gave what would be equivalent today to $17 billion to spread those lies, pretending to do what is good. I'm sure he believed. He wasn't a man of faith, so sure, in his perspective, educate them, teach them business, how to get wealthy. Yeah, so more people can go down the wrong path. And that's the problem with most people, isn't it? Even when you pretend to do good and you claim to do good and you genuinely want to do good, you still do what is evil. You're the blind leading the blind, and both fall into a hole. See, in his last few days, he sent a letter to his former partner, the devil, by the name of Frick. And he said, why don't we put our differences aside and meet up for just one more time? You can learn the history and see they had a fallout. And Frick said, oh no, don't worry, we'll see each other. We're both going to hell. I'll see you there. Well, he's not wrong. Evil men, enemies of God. Do not be dismayed just because somebody throws a couple pennies or a few million or $1 billion. Just because they put up a school or pretend to do what is just and right. Just like Martin Luther King said when he made a message, Paul's letter to the American Christians. He wrote it, obviously. Paul did not write it, but it makes the point, and you should look it up on YouTube. Martin Luther King, Paul's letter to American Christians, and he said, even if you do charity and you have no love, you've done nothing. And what is love but the love of God? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your being. That is love. The Lord is love. God is love and love is God. You cannot have love without having God. And when you have God, you have love, and you would love your fellow man. And such were not the men I mentioned, Carnegie and his associate. You gotta change your glasses, change the goggles you're using to see the world. Change your lenses, change your spiritual discernment and understanding. You have to get a new pair of eyes. You have to have your eyes opened by the Spirit to see the truth, or else you too are deceived and misled into a hole. Many people will reject this message, call me a crazy person, whatever. Schools are good, universities, people need jobs, all kind of irrelevant comments. People need God more than they need jobs. The Israelites in the desert 40 years did not have jobs. They had God. Foolish talk. You worship capitalism. Money is your God. Which is why so many worship Andrew Carnegie. Oh, Mr. Carnegie. Oh, Charles Schwab, JP Morgan. Ooh. You love throwing out those names everywhere. Because that's what you worship. But how many people talk about Moshe, about Gideon, about David? Elijah, Eliyahu, Elisha, about Nehemiah, about Ezra, about Daniel. Now, you talk about Charles Schwab and Rockefeller, because those are your heroes, the priests of capitalism. And just like your heroes, you too will fall into a hole and see your heroes in hell.